Welcome to Happier ADHD. My name's Marley Darling. I'm a second generation neurodiversity expert with over 17 years experience, and now I'm raising my own neurodiverse kids. You'll notice that I call the podcast a few different things, but we always explore these same topics that I've been looking at for the last 17 years. Psychology, mindset, neurodiversity, personal development, health and well-being, business, parenting, and more. So, without further ado, let's jump in. Hi, I'm Marley Darling. Welcome back to the podcast. The little big thing of this week was that the other day I made a lasagna for dinner, and while it was in the oven, I decided to whip up some snacks for the next few days. This is something that I've kind of written down to tell myself to do like the day before we go on outings, to have snacks on hand, because we need to have food to take with us. And it often feels like on those days, that's the days that we've run out of groceries and we don't quite have enough food, and I have to kind of scrounge around in the pantry to see what we have. So we really need to have snacks prepared. And I had set aside, on my schedule at least, not in real life, that the days before I should be putting aside time that day to make the snacks, and that hasn't been happening. That creates it as this whole extra task. And what I realized on this evening was that lasagna was in the oven was already hot. It's really quick to just whip up some muffins, so might as well do it. And this links back to what I said a couple of episodes ago about being smart about how we schedule routines and fitting things in. So this kind of just slipped in, and instead of being a whole extra task, it just molded into the task of cooking in the evening. The huge part of this, the huge little big thing, is that my kids came over and helped. I didn't force them. I didn't have this intention, but they were enticed over, and I ended up having both of them in the kitchen, one of them stirring the muffins, the other one making the Vegemite scrolls, and we made our own little production team, and they felt good about it and I felt good about it, and I was really proud and impressed and glad for how it happened. And then we had snacks for days. So I'd really love to recreate that moment and be able to integrate that into our routine, and hopefully get the kids involved, especially if we're making exciting snacks, and they can be different all the time to keep them interesting and make sure they don't get sick of them, because when you do make a batch of something, it lasts a few days. And hopefully that gets them more involved with that. So that was huge. I loved it. It was excellent. On my mind this week is productivity and motivation and momentum. And I talked last week about being a word artist and wanting to let more creativity in. And I got in the flow of making poetry every day, and it was feeling really good, but that consistency can't always hold up. And sometimes there's just a little dip in it. And I started to feel that lull, like I wasn't doing it quite as much, or like I was starting to overanalyze a little bit, especially once I started doing more technical things with my poetry, like creating graphic designs for them to put on Instagram. And then what happens with that lull is we can start to get some negative self-talk, and a bit of fear comes in, like what happens if this keeps dwindling? What happens if I come to a standstill? What happens if I can't get the motivation or momentum back? When will that return? Do I need to force myself into doing this? And that's when we create these big walls, these big ADHD walls in front of us. So rather than doing that, I wanted to give myself compassion and grace and let it dwindle just a bit, but also try and re-spark that within myself. One of my techniques is to get started on something, but just in the most small way possible. So no pressure to actually do anything at all, but just the very first step, which might be opening up a writing app and writing a first line of a poem and then seeing what happens. Really, really small steps, and then judging how I feel in response to actually doing the thing rather than to the concept of the thing in my mind. When we have these ADHD walls, often what we are reacting to is the idea of the thing. And if we actually get started, sometimes it doesn't feel like quite such a big deal. So I did that, And if I start writing and it's horrible, then I can stop. But what usually happens is I can do a bit at least, and sometimes it's not the top quality, or sometimes I need to do a few to kind of get in the mode, let my brain get in the mode of creativity. And other times I need to just get started, and then I find that, oh, this was here all along and I can do the thing. I just needed to get started and show that to myself. And often with these ADHD walls, that's all it is. We get these walls in front of us for the simplest of tasks, like getting out of bed in the cold to get a glass of water, and that can be pretty horrible, or brushing our teeth or vacuuming the floor. Yes, it is not fun for our brain. We might not have the dopamine and the motivation to do it, but it's not going to be physically painful. And if it is feeling really horrible, most things can be saved for later. But I do recommend trying that very first step and seeing how it feels. And if it's horrible, give yourself the permission to not do it. Because if we're always forcing ourselves to do the thing, then we're never going to want to get started. So there's a little bit of a catch-22 and a paradox there. But if you allow yourself to test the water, see how it feels, and then leave the water and wait till it's warm enough, then next time you're more likely to test the water rather than to develop a complex about, oh no, the water's always too uncomfortable and I don't want to give it a try. I also want to talk about procrastinating or procrastinating is another thing. So sometimes when we don't want to do a thing, we procrastinate, but productively. And I'm a big fan of productive procrastination. I think if you're getting stuff done, that's a huge benefit. In the past, when I've been putting off certain things, I've been able to do other certain things that I had been putting off at other times because they seemed less bad at the time. For example, on Friday, I didn't want my brain to focus, so I followed my energy, which was telling me, hey, I actually have a lot of physical energy to be tidying my house and tackling some big doom piles that really need to be moved, and kind of bits of my house that needed to be changed in their use so that they stop accumulating piles. And there were certain things that I had to move around. When you move one thing in your house and then you have to move a ton of things. So this was quite a complicated process, and I often don't have the energy for that. It seems really big and looming. But because I was putting off working on a blog post, that's something I've been thinking about doing and telling my brain for the last probably 10 days that I want to do. Because I wasn't in the mood for that, I ended up being super productive and having the energy and probably the dopamine as well to do this other task, because I knew that it was a relief from having to do the task of writing a blog post. And both of these tasks are equally valid. If I do the tidying task then it means later I don't have to do that, and it frees up time. As long as the thing that you're procrastinating with is valuable, is moving you forward in some way, is something you need to do anyway, then there's a huge benefit to doing that. Now, of course, if you don't want to do a task, then procrastinating in ways like giving yourself rest, rewards, fueling the dopamine, that is also worthwhile. But I would say that maybe that's a different tactic and it doesn't quite come under procrastination. You want to do that as an intentional technique. Whereas procrastination itself, if you can find the thing that would be a helpful thing to do, then go for it. Sometimes it means getting in the nitty-gritty and like cleaning the windowsills and things you never get to. That's probably valuable too, and that's up for you to judge what is a valuable task. And as long as we eventually get to the task that needs to get done, and as long as the task that needs to get done isn't super urgent, then I wholly support this technique of using the feeling of procrastination to be productive in other areas. Now, all these different types of work have a benefit. Cleaning your house has a benefit. Doing the back end of your business has a benefit. Doing the creative work has a benefit. And our brain will be in different moods at different times. So following the energy of the brain, following what it can do, is a way that we can support our brain. Now, like I said before, it's good to sit down and see how you respond to the actual task and see about getting started with it. But if it's not in the mood for that, it's truly valid to do something else. Sometimes I just can't get myself to do creative work and it seems like so much effort to do. And in those times, doing things like graphic design or some back-end stuff or some busy work feels like a relief from the creative things, and it can feel easier because I don't have to get my brain into that creative mode. But conversely, at other times, I really can't be bothered doing that boring stuff. It feels like that is such a hard work. Like I'm pulling a bag of rocks along the ground and it's heavy and it feels drudging, like drudgery. I'm not sure about that word. I need to look up its meaning later. I think it's a word. So you can see how, depending on how our brain feels, different things can feel hard. And sometimes what we can do is we can feel bad, like, oh, I'm taking the easy way out by doing the busy work today instead of doing the creative work or coming up with the ideas. Or, oh, I'm just doing creative work and I need to do the actual technical stuff. But both of those things need to happen. So why criticize ourselves for the mode that we are in? Same with cleaning the house. Sometimes cleaning the house is so much effort and you just can't be bothered. So if you find yourself with that energy and you're putting off doing some other kind of work, maybe we can actually be kind to ourselves and proud of ourselves that we are getting that done. And like I said, as long as it comes back around, as long as that cycle comes back around, as long as we can get our brain into the different modes when we absolutely need to, I think it is fine to follow your brain's energy. And the other thing, what was I going to say about, right. If you have a task and it feels overwhelming, the trick to get rid of overwhelm is to either reduce the task or give yourself more time. So if you do have a task that's urgent, if you can allow yourself more time, allow yourself more time. Like I'm saying, if you need to clean the house first, but you'll get to it later, that's fine. If it's super urgent and you need to get it done, you can try, if it's possible with that particular task, to reduce the demand. Get rid of anything else that you don't need to be doing. Make it easier in whatever ways you can make it easier. And if that's not possible, just give yourself a section of the task and hopefully that will help in regards to overwhelm. So that's a few of my thoughts about ADHD walls and maintaining some sense of motivation and allowing your brain to go through those cycles and just following that with compassion and letting that be a different way of being. This is how the ADHD brain works. We work in cycles, so we need to recognize that and allow that instead of always feeling like we're doing the wrong thing or not doing enough or need to force ourselves to do something else. As long as our lives are functioning, it's totally valid and we can function with acceptance for our brains and with love and compassion for that. We don't need to operate like everyone else in the world. Like neurotypicals, we don't need to run from 9 till 5 and be able to just make ourselves do any old boring task. We are not designed for that. So this is a big shift that needs to happen in terms of the approach and acceptance of ADHD. Moving on to the next section of the podcast is wins and workarounds. And this is related to what I just said. I took my own advice again. I took my own advice to sit down and start and then see how I feel. Yesterday, I finally did my blog. I'd worked on it a little bit throughout the week. I'd made myself sit down and kind of couldn't get into flow, but I wrote out some kind of messy writing that wasn't very constructive. Although that's a bit of a judgment there because it turns out that writing led me to several different blog topics and gave me a huge list of ideas. So it kind of created an opening, even though it was messy writing and it was kind of rambling on. I could take that and realize, hey, I'm making way too many points here, but that's going to give me a whole series of blog posts to write. So that was throughout the week that I did that. And then yesterday when I sat down and started editing it, I realized that it was too rambly. It was too many topics. And as I started editing, I just took the first thing I was talking about and I went with that. I refined it. I made it simple. And I spent a few hours and created a polished blog post and a huge list of ideas. So I completely broke that wall down that I'd been having for the last 10 days. And that process of spending some time mulling over the fact that I wanted to get to this task and spending some time just sitting down and exposing myself to it and doing what I think was a bad job at it, like just writing out those rambly words, actually led to valuable progress. And it's okay to start messy. It's okay to sit down and give it a go and not create the thing immediately, not have the outcome that you want immediately. The important thing is forward progress. The other thing that I did was yesterday, I got up in the morning and I finally did 10 minutes of morning yoga. And that's a super easy thing to do, but again, it's something that I've been mulling over and not been able to make myself do. I just couldn't physically get up in the morning, put myself on the floor and do yoga. And then finally, one day I was able to. I had this intention every day and I didn't put all this negative build up on myself. I just kept that intention that I would love to do this thing. And then I found the morning that the resistance wasn't too high and I did it. And I've broken that wall as well. I didn't get time to do it this morning because I need to move my morning routine earlier to give me some time. But I'm being flexible and I'm going to try and do it later. I'm going to set that intention. I know that I feel really good when I do this habit. And the funny thing is, this is something that I feel like has been a part of my routine and I know it's so good for me and I would love it to be part of my life. And I kind of feel like it is a part of me. It's something that I do. It's something that suits me. But I realize that I haven't done it in years. It's really interesting when we actually recognize the timelines of how long we've been putting something off or how long we've been trying to adopt something into our life. And until we make the decision and set the intention to actually do it, it kind of sits on the back burner. So there might be things in your life as well that you feel like are something that you do or something that are part of you. Maybe a walk that you love to do and in your mind it's quite often, but you realize you haven't been there in 6 months. Or maybe it's a hobby that you haven't picked back up. What is something in your life that maybe you want to pick back up and add back into your routine? Have a little think because it can feel really good to get back into things that have felt good in the past, even if there's a little bit of a wall in front of doing it. If you make the decision and set the intention, then you can do it. And actually, as I just said that, I realized I'd like to do some more watercolor as well. So I might put that in an accessible place and have that as something to do in my downtime. That's exciting. It's been a while since I've done that. Moving on to Life Lounge. In Life Lounge, what have I written down? Okay, I've written down about morning routine and having a good morning routine. Having dopamine first, finding something that gives you dopamine. I know that phones and scrolling can do that, can wake us up, but there are more beneficial things to do. Even if you need to use your phone, if that blue light helps you wake you up, maybe you can do something that's better for your brain. If that's something that you want to do, if you like to read, if you like to do Duolingo or Wordle or something like that. Or you can open the curtains and have some fresh light. You can move your body. I like to exercise. I'm going to be doing that yoga. Going for a walk is something that I've really wanted to do. And finally, I left my kids to go for a walk in the mid-morning. And it was the first kind of thing I did of my day. And it was sunny and beautiful. And I got outside without the kids so I could walk at a normal adult pace. And that was beautiful. It was a nice way to start the day. In the past, something that I've done is kind of raced to burn the candle at both ends. I want to use that morning energy to be productive. And then I have also done that in the evenings at times and been burning that candle Sometimes we feel like we need to be productive all the time. And especially in the mornings, I know that I can feel eager to do the thing that I have to do because I'm worried that I won't get the momentum later. But as we've just said, we can sit down and see how we feel about the task. And that doesn't mean we have to get straight into it. I've kind of done that this morning because I did skip my yoga, which would only have taken 10 minutes. But that's also because of our routine today. There are things we have to go out and do. So I wanted to get the podcast done, but at other times, I've really wanted to just get up and force myself to work while I can. And that's a valid thing to do if that suits. But if we're kind of skipping the self-care first, then that can really burn us out. And maybe you do this, maybe you have to go into a job and so it's hard to have some time and choice in the morning, or maybe you have kids, especially young ones, that really force you into doing things for them straight away. But maybe you can consider how you wake up in the mornings and what you would like to do. And if you have things where you need to be productive, and if you ever feel like me, regardless of whether it's in the morning or later in the day, that you need to force yourself to do something, we can relax into the now. We can relax into the moment and how we feel now and trust that momentum will come. We can use those techniques I spoke about before, and I've got plenty more techniques to spark momentum later. We don't need to feel like we always need to force ourselves preemptively, like feeling like we are never doing enough, or during our relaxed time, feeling this fear and this pressure that we have to build up that momentum and that motivation later. It takes away from our true rest, and then we have less capacity to do the task and the action later. So if we can learn to trust in that rest and trust that we will get to the task, then that creates more balance and it is better for our brains, and then it gives us that more capacity to function better later. Next section of the podcast is called Joy Break. And what I've been doing this week, I've found myself noticing the little things. Looking out the window, and when I was on the treadmill, I saw a wattlebird out there because my window looks out on the trees, and the wattlebird was looking at me, and I just spent some time looking at this bird. There was a Pacific gull on the light post outside my bedroom window, and it's huge. It's too big for the light post, and it was quite comical, and I just watched it as it pecked at something on the light post. I went for a walk the other day and I noticed the pollen on the trees and the flowers in the garden beds. And I think that it's creating this contrast of, I'm in my house, it's winter time, I'm doing work, I'm looking at a screen. And then when I go outside, I really want to connect with the world and really want to notice the little details in the leaves and the things that are around me. So I've really appreciated having those moments of truly seeing and noticing and being mindful. And I've felt really good in the past when I've cultivated mindfulness, and it's something that I've really put off for a while. So it's been nice to just find myself doing that without any force or effort. So that's my little joy break at the moment, is looking out at nature. Now, the last thing for this week, letting go and letting in. What I'm letting go of is force and kind of berating myself, like, oh, I should be doing more, I should be doing this other thing, or whatever that negative self-talk might be, and switching that out for that compassion and that trust and that self-belief. And what I'm letting in is that momentum for creativity and forward motion in all its forms, whatever the forward motion may be, whatever the task might be that's moving me towards where I want to go, is valid and appreciated. So that's it for this week. I will see you in the next podcast, and you'll be able to read my blog either now or soon, and all the topics will be overlapping, but blog posts will be a bit more refined and podcasts will either go into more depth or be a bit more rambly, but hopefully both are valid and both are enjoyable, and you'll see that it's not going to be the exact same thing in both. I will talk about similar topics, but they'll be a little bit different. My plan is to have them supplementing each other, and both providing a way to get value and connect and have you be able to access this information in whatever way suits at the time. And I love that a blog post will just be there for you if you need to look up a particular thing quickly or review a topic. So I'm really excited about that. And I'll also talk to you in the next episode. Have a great week. Bye. So you've got neurodiverse kids in your life. You've probably noticed that they don't respond well to traditional parenting techniques or discipline or ways to get them motivated or to comply. Maybe you're tearing your hair out with stress and the same old struggles and fights and arguments every single day. Or perhaps you're feeling completely lost because you've tried absolutely everything and it just doesn't seem to work. These kids do not respond to behavior charts. They don't respond to power being asserted over them. What these kids need is something completely different. And what I'm going to suggest to you is you actually stop trying to change them. If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And you cannot change these children. You cannot control their behavior. But if you change something around them, you change their environment, you change how you act, it will change how they react. It will change how they respond. If you change something, then no longer will you be stuck in this cycle of doing what you've always done and getting what you've always got. And those traditional methods do not work. So stop wasting your time and energy on them. I know you're looking for a solution and you feel like it's just not possible anymore, but let me tell you, I was in the exact same boat, and then I realized what we need is to do something radically different. My approach is to change the environment around them and to change how you interact with them, and that will have the biggest impact. It'll stop you feeling like your head is butting up against a wall, and it will start actually creating change with less effort. I believe in small, easy to implement shifts that create big change. So if you're interested in seeing what I have to offer, head over to marleydarling.com, and I've got a free webinar there for you to check out, and then comprehensive programs that cover everything I've learned in over a decade of parenting neurodiverse kids, and also in being a neurodiverse person myself who's been studying neurodiversity for over 17 years. I'm here to help you. I'm here to give a different approach, and I wholeheartedly believe that we need a radically different approach to support these children, to empower them to live the best lives possible, and to give you a bit of a break as the parent. So head on over to marleydarling.com, where you can find some free resources and maybe check out my comprehensive programs if you're ready to see a massive difference in your life through just some small shifts. See you there.